Hello everyone, this is class number 1 in American Literature course in summer course 2019-2020. Today we are going to study American literature and answer what American literature is. What is the relationship? Why do we talk about colonial literature when we talk about American literature? And we will discuss two of the first settlers in America, William Bradford and Anne Bradstreet, within the framework of the Puritan culture at the time. But first, I will start with a question for you. I want each one of you to contemplate this picture. Of course, you can see white people and Native Americans. The Native American is receiving something by a white woman with the dog next to her and a white man with sword on his side. Okay? Hanging. Now, this is in fact portrayed to display coexistence. It's like, yeah, you can deduct from it that there is coexistence between the settler colonialists and the indigenous people of America. The occasion of this picture is that these people, according to the painting, celebrating Thanksgiving after harvest. Of course, Thanksgiving is a concept that is taken from biblical literature to indicate flourishing life after predicament, after drought. Okay? The first Thanksgiving. I want you to go home, Google Thanksgiving, and write 2 paragraphs, your own work. Do not take from others. Okay? On Thanksgiving as a concept in the American culture. There is a controversy on the concept itself. I hope that it is manifested in these 2 paragraphs. Okay? Now, let me start with the colonial period in New England. When Christopher Columbus invaded America in 1492, he established colonialism or European colonialism on the American soil. Afterwards, specifically 100 years after he landed on the American soil, Europeans from the continent started to hail, either searching for haven, a refuge from religious persecution, okay, or looking for new fortunes. These people came together and formed what came to be known after 200 years of attempts, the United States of America. There was a scramble from the European continent. Germans, British, French, Dutch, but the first to reach the Americas is the Spanish. Had history taken another course, the whole continent might have been, or might be now, a Spanish influence area. And a good example of this is Latin America. Now, it is likely that these people who came to America included intellectuals, included people who write. This is what we need to focus on now in a course on American literature. Now, these intellectuals coming from different parts of Europe, specifically England, started to reproduce their own indigenous culture. They used English as their own language despite certain attempts of using other languages. Remember that the first published written text in America was not written in English. This tells you how panoramic, like a panorama. It was like a panorama. Okay? The note here, it is likely that no other colonist in the history of the world were as intellectual as the Puritans, who formed New England. Now we have two terms. We have two keywords, New England and Puritans. New England indicates the states in the northeast of America. These include New York, Washington is one of them, but Washington, Maryland, Virginia. Washington is part Virginia, part Maryland. Connecticut, New Jersey. These are the states that came to be known as New England before the United States of America as a term came to existence. Okay? Puritans literally means or derives from pure, something pure, purify, purification. These people are trying to be as sincere as possible, to be clear, to be sin-free people. Okay? And these people were known to be Puritans because they left England after they were subjected to persecution at the hands of other religious factions. Okay? Between 1630 and 1690, there were as many university graduates in the northeastern section of the United States known as New England. All these are Puritans. As in the mother country here is England. An astounding fact when one considers that most educated people of the time were aristocrats who were unwilling to risk their lives in wilderness conditions. So these people who took the risk to travel through the ocean from England, in fact, were as intellectual as people who come from aristocratic descent. Okay? They are self-made and also self-educated Puritans who were notable exceptions. They wanted education to understand and execute God's will. They were so religious. We will come to know how they dealt with dancing, how they dealt with card playing, how they wanted to be the God's servants on the land. And they believed that they are migrating to fulfill the promise of God in the promised land. To the Puritans, America was the new land of Canaanite, the new land of Canaan. And they believe that they themselves are like the people who are waiting for Jesus to come and lift the misery and inaugurate a 1,000 years of happiness for humanity. Okay, we will come to this. The Puritan definition of good writing was that which brought home a full awareness. Of course, in order to promote their own ideas, they resorted to writing, but what type of writing did they use? Okay? They used writing in order to promote and spread the word of God. Puritan style varied enormously from complex metaphysical poetry. Everything metaphysical refers to something beyond human imagination, okay? To homely journals and crushingly pedantic religious history. Whatever the style or genre, certain themes remained constant. These themes include that life is seen as a test, failure led to eternal damnation and hellfire. Remember Adam and Eve and how they ate the fruit and they were descended to earth. Oh, this is the test. This is the failure, okay? And success to heavenly bliss. So these are the Puritans. The Puritans are migrants from England mainly who settled in America and who first established colonies premised on religious tenets. One of these Puritans is William Bradford. William Bradford, 1590 to 1657, was elected governor of Plymouth in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which became very famous. And shortly after the separatists landed, he was a deeply pious. You see the word pious. If you look at the religious words in any text about the Puritans, you will see how much these people are deeply rooted in religious discourse. How religious discourse, in fact, informs their social behavior. Okay? Self-educated man who had learned several languages, including Hebrew. Why did William Bradford, a settler colonialist, okay, leaving England, going to America, learn Hebrew? There is this connection. I told you that they believed that they were going to the promised land, waiting for Jesus to descend from heaven and inaugurate the 1,000 years or millennium of happiness. He wanted to learn Hebrew to see with his own eyes the ancient oracles of God in their native beauty. I want to tell you something. There is this narrative that when the Americans revolted against the British and gained their independence, they thought of a language other than English to be their official or national language. And one of the languages that were suggested on the table or put on the table to choose from is Hebrew. Luckily, I don't know whether it was luckily or not luckily, that Hebrew was a choice, was an option to the fathers of America. William Bradford, his participation in the migration to Holland and the Mayflower voyage, remember this is very important. Mayflower is the name of the ship that took Bradford and his fellow English people from England to America, okay? And his duties as governor made him ideally suited to be the first historian of his colony. His history of Plymouth plantation like farm, is a clear and compelling account of the colony's beginning. His description of the first view of America is justly famous. His lines are really striking. He tells something about how these people managed through turbulent times, atmosphere, and place. Look at the words. Being thus past the vast ocean. To compare, in order to cross The Atlantic Ocean, you need 9 hours by airplane nowadays. How did these people cross it in these times where ships were not so sophisticated? Okay, now you can imagine the trouble they took in order to cross the ocean, in order to leave their country, home country, and dwell on another country. Being thus past the vast ocean and a sea of troubles, they had now no friends to welcome them, nor inns to entertain or refresh their weather-beaten bodies. The weather was so harsh on them. No houses or much less towns to repair to seek for succor, savage barbarians. You can see colonialist description of other. The native becomes a barbarian in the eye of the settler colonialist. Were readier to fill their sides with arrows than otherwise, and for the reason it was winter, and they that know the winters of that country know them to be sharp and violent and subject to cruel and fierce storms. Oh, until this very day, America's weather is really tricky and treacherous. Weather-beaten face and the whole country full of wood, and thickets presented a wild and savage hue. Bradford also recorded the first document of colonial self-governance in the English New World, the Mayflower Compact, drawn up while the Pilgrims were on board ship. The compact here means agreement, okay? The compact was a harbinger of the Declaration of Independence to come a century and a half later. This is the importance of William Bradford. The Declaration of Independence, we will come to it later, is a crucial document in the history of America. Now look at the characteristics of the Puritan approach to life. They disapproved of such secular amusements such as dancing and card playing, which were associated with ungodly aristocrats and immoral living. Reading or writing light books also fell into this category. Puritan minds poured their tremendous energies into non-fiction and pious genres. They focused on poetry, sermons, theological tracts, and histories. Their intimate diaries and meditations record the rich inner lives of this introspective and intense people. So these are the characteristics of the Puritans. Interestingly, we will come to this later, that these Puritans, because they are hardworking, they are so serious, they are rigid, they are focused on what they are and what they are assigned to, they became a good ally of capitalism in America. They had this common thing with Americans, okay? with capitalism, sorry. Let us take Anne Bradstreet, another settler colonialist in America who wrote within the framework of Puritanism as well. It is interesting that the first published book of poems by an American was written by a woman, Anne Bradstreet. It is not surprising that the book was published in England. So the first American book is published by a woman and is published by published in England. Why is that? Because England at the time was the hub of cultural dissemination, while America was just a startup nation that still looking for ways of life. Okay, and Anne Bradstreet migrated from England to America, and her writing was totally following the footsteps of writers from England, but specifically the metaphysical poets, as we will see shortly. Okay? So it is not surprising that the book was published in England given the lack of printing presses in the early years of the first American colonies. Born and educated in England, Anne Bradstreet was the daughter of an Earl State manager. She immigrated with her family when she was 18, so she was like an adult. Her husband eventually became governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which later grew into the great city of Boston, Northeast. This is New England, okay? She preferred her long religious poems. She's religious, she's pious, she's family dedicated woman. She loves her husband. You'll see how she cherishes the family values and how she cherishes her husband too. And she wrote on conventional subjects such as no, she didn't write on these things, okay? Preferred religious poems on conventions such as the seasons, but contemporary readers most enjoy the witty poems on subjects from daily life and her warm and loving poems to her husband and children. She was inspired by English metaphysical poetry, and her book, The 10th Muse, lately sprung up in America, shows the influence of Edmund Spenser, Philip Sidney, and other poets as well. She often uses elaborate conceits or extended metaphors. To My Dear and Loving Husband is one of her famous poems, in which she uses Oriental imagery, love theme and idea. When we talk about Oriental imagery, this means that Oriental imagery can take us, in fact, alludes to the fact that the wife is submissive to her husband, or obedient, or easygoing, or her personality is shaped according to the desires of her husband. Okay? And here, religion is the most important factor that influences her choices. Okay? I am now going to read one of her poems in which she cherishes family life, cherishes her husband. Okay? Look at her poem here. If ever two were one, then surely we. Okay? She and her husband. If ever man were loved by wife, then thee. You are loved most by me, only by me. If ever wife was happy in a man, compare with me. Okay? I am the wife who is always happy with her man. Yea, women, if you can follow my example. I am good to my wife. I am so good to I'm obedient, I'm happy, I make him happy. I prize thy love more than whole mines of gold. You are more important for me, my husband, to whole mines of gold, or all the riches that the East doth hold. It's interesting that East is a source of inspiration for these writers, okay, with its fortunes, wealth, imagination, etc., etc. My love is such that rivers cannot quench, river cannot end my love. It's like fire. Nor aught but love for thee give recompense. Your love gives me everything. Thy love is such I can no we repay. The heavens reward thee manifold, I pray. She prays that God rewards her husband. Then while we live in love, let's so persevere that when we live no more, we may live ever. The last two lines are about being immortal by her own writing. I finish with a question for you. What are the characteristics of Puritanism? And in two paragraphs, trace the timeline of writing in the US, especially the literary writing. Next time, we are going to study the democratic origins and revolutionary writers, and we will focus on Washington Irving, the father of American literature. Thank you for now, and see you next time.